So.
And then we have a picture of what Frederick Law Olmsted suggested for the Charles Bank as a plan. Maybe you can interpret us of what in this plan.
Well, it included play areas for children, gymnasia both for men and boys and women and children, and a promenade. In fact, the next slide shows the promenade
Park
itself.
Yes. And of course, what is interesting is that there was this outdoor gymnasium. It was, I think, America's first public outdoor gymnasium.
Right.
And we often use that example that the Charles River has always been a place for active recreation. And so as we are building a skateboarding park further down the river, there already was a precedent.
Right, historically very appropriate.
Absolutely. And we have another example further up the river of something very athletic, something that very few people know because there are really no signs left of the Speedway.
The Charles River Speedway, which was built in 1899. It was a mile-long race course.
Race course for horse buggies.
Primarily for sulky racing.
Sulky racing.
But the owners of horse-drawn conveyances could bring their conveyances to that location and simply have rushes and races. And it took a lot of that activity off of the streets of the city, which were growing more and more crowded. Mm-hmm. Beacon Street and Commonwealth Avenue had been used for that purpose earlier on. So the Charles River Speedway really substituted for those.
So they would speed on the city streets? Is that the idea?
In the earlier period, yeah.
Oh.
It was originally on the Mill Dam, and then later, on Beacon Street and Commonwealth Avenue after they were constructed in the 1885 to 95 period.
And of course, there's still the Speedmaster building as a remnant, and
That's
we hope
right.
that this will be restored one day.
That's the only piece, actually, of the Charles River Speedway that still exists.
That's on the corner of Western Avenue.
Western Avenue and the Leo Birmingham Parkway.
Yeah. And then this wonderful picture of the actual Speedway with a lot of horse buggies on it.
1902. This is Speedway Day, the opening of the Speedway in 1902.
And it went all the way to the Western Avenue Bridge.
It went from the bottom of what was then Market Street, and that area has since been renamed the Leo Birmingham Parkway, to just beyond the Western Avenue Bridge. So it was a little more than a mile in extent. And
there was also, in that area, parallel to that, was also a bicycle racing track.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's sure a lot of bicyclists would like to see that.
And bicycling was very popular in that period.
It was very popular. Well, it's getting more and more popular again, and we have a mayor that is a bicyclist himself, so that is wonderful. So that's great. Well, now we're going to the Cambridge side, the Cambridge embankment. Tell us what these looks pretty muddy. What we're seeing here.
This is actually a little older than the other projects. It began in the 1880s. And what you see here are people out on the river at low tide, and they seem to be digging for shellfish.
Oh, wow, I'm glad I don't have to eat that shellfish. That must have been pretty ghastly with all those industrial things flowing in the river and the slaughterhouses, the abattoirs. Yes, sometimes it's good not to know too much. Mm. But then the dam was being built, and that really changed everything for the Charles River. The dam came in and it was constructed between 1906 and 1909, I believe it was, and the tides were excluded by the dam in 1908, and that's what we see here. We see that wooden dam under construction. Mm-hmm. And that stabilized the level of the river, and it allowed improvements to be made along the margin of the river in a much more systematic fashion. Yeah, and of course then the esplanade was built. That was no longer tidal, and it was much more stable. And we're now moving up the river again and start looking at some of the institutions that kind of strengthened their real estate on the river. 3 universities, of course, came to the banks of the river. People don't, I think, realize that Harvard was confined to the area around the Harvard Yard,
until essentially the decade of the 1890s. And then a variety of Harvard facilities began to be built along the edge of the river. And what this slide shows is the North Harvard Street Bridge on the site where the Anderson Bridge is today, with a couple of boathouses, the Weld Boathouse on the Cambridge side and the Newell Boathouse on the Allston side of the river. And also you see Carey's Cage, which was the original athletic facility built in Allston, and behind it the 1903 Harvard Stadium.
The stadium, yeah, that's still there, very marked, very strong shape. Then you show us here these Harvard dorms that, facing the river. Today you don't see that much because of the sycamores and the trees have grown up, but they were built in the early 20th century.
They were, yeah, 1913, one of the first one.
We want to see the next picture here.
And also 1927. At the same time that the Harvard School of Business Administration was being constructed on the Allston side of the river. So you have two views here of those buildings. And I think one very interesting aspect, the casual observer looking at these buildings today probably thinks that they're much older than they in fact are.
Yeah, let's move to the picture that shows Harvard on the Charles. The next picture, yes, lovely, thank you. Yes, you definitely think that they have been there for a long time, but it's just 100 years.
Architecture, they give an appearance of being older than they in fact are, but they're 20th century buildings.
Yeah, and then a wonderful picture you have here with the Charles completely flat, and with the reflection of all those chimneys, because probably all those dorm rooms had their own fireplaces. Yeah.
And the Weeks footbridge there to the left, which was provided to link the northern side of the campus to the campus on the Allston side of the river. It's a bridge exclusively for pedestrians.
And for steam. I understand it was built to bring steam to the Harvard Business School. It was cheaper to build a bridge than to dig a tunnel for the steam, and the steam is still in there.
I'm learning something.
Yeah. We've recently illuminated both the bridge and also the underbelly, and so that is quite a challenge to have a bridge that also carries steam pipes. Yeah. Now, and then you also have the Baker Library at the business school, again, that's a McKim-Meaden White building, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah, just like the bridge
the entire
itself.
complex, McKim-Meaden White.
Yeah.
Were the architects, a great architectural firm. I mean, these buildings are extraordinary landmarks, and we're privileged to have them on the river. I mean, they give the river a level of dignity and
beauty. Yes, yeah, we're very
aesthetic
lucky.
Appeal.
It's good. It's good to remind ourselves how lucky we are to have not only that body of water and the parklands, but great architecture on both sides. Well, you're taking us now further down the river to MIT.
To MIT.
Which didn't start on the Charles. You said, you mentioned it was in the back bay.
MIT started on Boylston Street in the vicinity of the New England Life Insurance Company buildings, and didn't move across the river to Cambridge until 1913. They began construction of the complex in 1913. It was completed in 1916, and the architect was a gentleman named Wells Bosworth. And he had graduated from MIT, the School of Architecture, in 1899. So,
it was his own school, wonderful.
And he adopted the design for the central component of the complex was based on the Pantheon of Rome. I mean, this is a neoclassical architecture of the first order.
A very grandiose plan, yes. Yeah.